Her best friend wears her wedding ring minutes before the ceremony. Then Amara freezes in the doorway, watching Nina slowly turn her hand under the dressing room light, the diamond catching every flash like it already belongs to her. And for a second no one notices Amara is standing there until the air itself seems to stop moving. The makeup brush in the stylist's hand hanging midair, Nina smiling like she has rehearsed this moment longer than the wedding itself. 3 hours earlier, the bridal suite of the Carlton Grand Hotel was alive with rushing feet, satin dresses sliding across carpet, and soft chaos disguised as celebration. Amara stood in front of the mirror adjusting the neckline of her ivory gown while her fingers kept returning to the empty space on her hand where her engagement ring should have been. She checked the velvet box again, opened it, closed it, then opened it harder as if the ring might appear out of guilt. Nina entered without knocking, carrying a tray of champagne flutes, her voice light and sweet in a way that never asked permission. "You look tense, Amara. It's your wedding day," she said, placing the tray down carefully. Amara didn't look away from the mirror. "I just need my ring." Nina paused for half a second too long, then smiled. "Of course, it's probably with the jeweler for cleaning. Remember you left it yesterday." But Amara did not remember that. She remembered taking it off only once. And that was when Nina insisted on helping her organize everything. Across the room, a small camera light blinked on and off near the floral arrangement. Unnoticed, Amara finally turned, her eyes scanning Nina's face the way she used to in college when something felt off but she couldn't name it. Nina met her gaze without flinching, too calm, too steady, like someone standing on a stage already built for them. A knock interrupted them. The wedding coordinator announced the limousine would arrive in 40 minutes. And Nina stepped closer, adjusting Amara's veil with slow precision. "You don't need to worry about anything today. I've got you," she whispered, but her fingers lingered 1 second too long on Amara's shoulder, squeezing just enough to feel. Like control, Amara exhaled, forcing herself to trust the woman she had called sister for years. She picked up her phone to check the time, and that was when she heard it. A soft metallic click from behind her. Nina turning her hand slightly, and there it was, the ring, not in the box, not in the vault, but on Nina's finger, fitting perfectly like it had always been waiting for her. Nina noticed Amara staring, and instead of hiding it, she smiled wider, tilting her hand under the light. "Isn't it beautiful? I just wanted to make sure it fits before you wear it forever." The words landed wrong, too rehearsed, too deliberate, and somewhere near the flowers, the hidden camera light stopped blinking and stayed on, recording everything. Amara did not move, did not speak, but inside her phone, buried under wedding apps and reminders, a single file labeled voice note, "Do not play yet," waited silently. And for the first time that morning, Amara realized the wedding was already happening. Without her being asked if she was still the bride, Amara did not move when she saw the ring on Nina's finger. But what no one noticed in that frozen moment was the way her hand slowly tightened around her phone. Not in anger but in calculation, as if she had just confirmed something she had been afraid to believe for too long. She turned away from Nina without a word and walked straight toward the vanity table where her bridal team was still adjusting flowers and perfume bottles. The room, buzzing again as if nothing had happened. And in that fragile return of noise, Amara made a choice that cost her more than anyone in the room could understand. She picked up her engagement folder, the one containing the signed pre-wedding checklist, vendor confirmations, and legal documents for the marriage registry, and instead of placing it back, she quietly slid it into her tote bag, a small act that looked harmless but immediately shifted the direction of everything that was about to happen. Her stylist called her name asking if she was okay, and Amara forced a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "I just need 5 minutes," she said softly, then stepped out into the hallway where the hotel air felt colder, sharper, almost accusatory. Her heels clicked against the marble as she walked past staff members carrying floral arrangements and champagne trays. No one stopping her. No one seeing the storm forming in her silence. In the elevator mirror, she finally saw her own reflection properly. A bride who was supposed to be stepping into certainty, but instead looked like someone standing at the edge of collapse without falling. Her phone buzzed once. Then again, Darius calling, but she did not answer. Instead, she opened her contacts and found the number of the one person who had always helped her with legal paperwork for the wedding. The wedding planner's assistant. She hesitated for a moment, then sent a single message. "Do you have copies of everything I signed?" The reply came almost instantly. Yes, why? Amara stared at it, her thumb hovering over the screen, because she suddenly remembered Nina's hands on her shoulder earlier. The way she had squeezed just slightly too long. The way she had said, "I've got you," like a promise that didn't belong to friendship but to ownership. The elevator doors opened on the lobby level, and for a brief second she considered walking out of the hotel entirely, leaving the dress, the guests, the expectation, but instead she turned toward the security office, a decision forming inside her that had nothing to do with emotion anymore. Inside the small office, she requested access to the bridal suite cameras under the excuse of a missing item, her voice steady, controlled, almost too calm to question. The security officer hesitated but eventually pulled up the feed, and there it was, a time-stamped view of her own dressing room, Nina standing near the mirror, Amara's ring visible on her finger again. No longer a mistake but a pattern. Amara leaned closer to the screen, her reflection faintly visible in the glass, and in that moment she understood something shifting under her ribs. This was not confusion, not misunderstanding, but structure, a plan unfolding in real time. She thanked the officer and walked out without explaining anything. Her heels slower now, heavier, as if each step was carrying a weight she could no longer put down, and as she returned toward the elevator, her phone lit up again. This time a new notification from the wedding group chat. Final preparations complete. Everything will proceed as discussed. But no one had told her what discussed meant, and for the first time, Amara realized she was not just missing her ring, she was missing the truth of her own wedding. The security office door closed behind Amara with a soft mechanical click that felt louder than anything she had heard all morning, and inside that dim room filled with monitors and quiet static, the truth of her wedding stopped being a feeling and became a recorded system. The officer leaned back in his chair, scrolling through timestamps while Amara stood still behind him, watching herself on multiple screens as if she were already an outsider to her own life. Then one folder caught her attention, labeled under Standard Event Protocol. Bridal Suite Pre-Check, Internal Use Only. She did not recognize it, but the officer opened it anyway without hesitation. Inside were scheduled camera activations, vendor entry logs, and something more unsettling, a list of key participants. Requiring observation. Nina's name appeared on it, but so did Darius, and next to each name were small checkmarks marked compliant. Amara's breath tightened as she leaned closer. "What is this?" she asked quietly. The officer shrugged. "Standard for high-profile weddings. Families sometimes request observation for security or assurance." He paused like he wasn't sure which word was safer. Amara felt her stomach drop at the phrase assurance, as if her entire wedding had been under quiet supervision without her knowledge. She pointed at Nina's name, and the officer hesitated before saying, "Your planner submitted the request 2 weeks ago." Amara froze, her mind trying to rebuild a timeline that no longer made sense. The planner had been with her since the beginning, trusted, calm, always insisting on smooth coordination. But now that word felt like something heavier, something designed to hide pressure rather than prevent chaos. Another file popped up automatically. This one, audio-linked, labeled Suite Sync, Ambient Capture. And, before Amara could stop it, a short playback began, Nina's voice, faint but unmistakable, saying, "She won't question anything if it looks like a misunderstanding," followed by Darius's voice, lower, controlled, "Just make sure the paperwork is ready before she arrives." Amara stepped back instinctively as if the sound itself had physical weight. The officer immediately muted the audio, glancing at her now with discomfort. "I shouldn't be showing you this without authorization," he admitted. But Amara was no longer listening to him. Her attention locked on the screen where timestamps showed coordinated activity between bridal staff, legal clerks, and the planner's assistant she had messaged earlier. The same assistant who had replied too quickly, too cleanly. Amara pulled out her phone again and reread the message. "Yes. Why?" And suddenly it didn't feel like a response, it felt like confirmation. Outside the security room glass doors, she could see flashes of movement from the hotel corridor, guests beginning to arrive early, unaware that the foundation of the ceremony was already shifting beneath them. The officer cleared his throat and said quietly, "If what you're seeing is accurate." Then someone requested structured substitution protocol. Amara slowly turned to him. Substitution for what? But even as she asked, She already knew the answer was not something she wanted to hear spoken aloud. Instead, the officer looked away, and on the screen behind him Nina's recorded name remained highlighted in a soft yellow box, as if the system itself was waiting for Amara to accept something that had already been decided without her. Amara left the security office without waiting for permission to release her, the echo of Nina's name still burning behind her eyes like a warning light she could not unsee. And as she stepped back into the hotel corridor, the atmosphere had already changed. The carpet felt softer, the lighting warmer, the kind of controlled luxury that pretended nothing was wrong even when everything was shifting underneath it. Staff members moved faster now. Not chaotic but coordinated, like every step had been rehearsed for a script Amara had never been given. She walked past the mirrored walls of the Carlton Grand and caught fragments of herself breaking into reflections. Bride, stranger, witness, and something in between. And for the first time she realized she was not simply attending her wedding. She was inside a system that had been built around it without her full consent. At the end of the corridor, 2 security attendants stood beside double doors marked event operations, private access only. They stopped her immediately. "Ma'am, this area is restricted," one of them said, polite but firm. Amara lifted her chin, her voice steady in a way she did not feel. "I have access to my own wedding." The second attendant hesitated, speaking into a discreet earpiece, and after a short pause the doors unlocked with a quiet electronic tone that felt less like permission and more like observation. Inside, the room was nothing like the bridal suite. It was colder, brighter, lined with glass screens showing live feeds of ballroom lighting, guest arrivals, seating charts, and legal overlays projected beside them like invisible architecture of control. A woman in a tailored black suit stood at the center table, flipping through a tablet with surgical precision. She looked up only once, scanning Amara from head to toe without surprise, as if she had been expected all along. "Amara Cole?" the woman said, not asking, confirming. "I'm Lillian Cross, event director." Amara noticed immediately that no one in this room spoke in casual tones. Everything was measured, transactional, structured. Lillian gestured to the table where a thick binder sat open under a weighted glass block. "Final ceremony authorization," she said, and tapped the page where Amara's signature appeared alongside Darius's and a third signature labeled executive witness. Amara's eyes narrowed. "I never signed that clause." Lillian did not react. "That's not how this works in contracted ceremonies of this scale," she replied calmly. "You authorized conditional delegation through your planner." Amara felt a sharp pulse behind her ribs. Conditional delegation. Lillian continued scrolling, revealing pages Amara had never seen. Clauses about substitution contingency, identity, alignment protocols, and a final override line that could be triggered by majority family consent. This wasn't just a wedding, it was a managed agreement system. And somewhere inside it Nina's presence was not an accident but a variable already accounted for. Amara stepped closer, pointing at the signature line. "Who approved this override?" Lillian paused for half a second too long before answering. "Your groom's family office." And that was when the room's glass doors slid open again behind her. Not with urgency but with intention, and Amara did not need to turn around to feel it. Darius had arrived, and with him, whatever version of truth this system had been hiding was now watching her directly for the first time. Darius stepping into the operations room did not change the temperature, but it changed the weight of everything inside it, as if the air itself recognized a decision had just arrived. He paused at the entrance rather than walking in fully, eyes locking first on Amara, then on the screens behind her that still displayed her signature under clauses she had never knowingly accepted. Amara did not move toward him or away from him. She simply stood between the glass table and the wall of monitors like someone refusing to be repositioned in a story that was already trying to rewrite her. Lillian Cross straightened slightly but did not speak, waiting instead as if this moment was also scheduled. Darius finally stepped in, calm in a way that felt rehearsed rather than natural. "Amara, we can fix this before it escalates," he said. But Amara's eyes dropped to the binder on the table instead of his face. She reached forward and slowly flipped through pages until she stopped at one line highlighted in pale gray. "Substitution contingency may be enacted upon mutual executive agreement." She tapped it once, not angrily, but precisely, like identifying a flaw in something too carefully built to admit cracks. "Explain this," she said quietly, and for the first time. Darius hesitated, not because he lacked words, but because the words he had were no longer safe to use. Before he could answer, Amara noticed something else on the table. A second device, a small encrypted recorder labeled Event Sync Unit, backup audio, its indicator light pulsing faintly. She reached for it without asking permission, and Lillian did not stop her, only watched. Amara pressed play, and a distorted fragment of Nina's voice emerged, sharper, more confident than before. Once she sees the documents, she'll focus on legality, not emotion. Then another voice, Darius, unmistakable, responding, make sure the confirmation email triggers after she's already inside the venue. Amara stopped the playback immediately, not because she was shocked, but because something in her expression had shifted into clarity. She set the device back down carefully, as if it now carried weight beyond electronics. Lillian exhaled quietly, almost imperceptibly, and for the first time her professional distance softened into something closer to concern. You're not supposed to be seeing that layer of the system, she said. Amara looked at her directly, then at Darius, and spoke with controlled steadiness. I didn't walk into a wedding. I walked into a contract I was never fully shown. That sentence changed the room more than any accusation could have. Because it wasn't emotional, it was structural. Darius stepped forward half a pace, lowering his voice. This isn't what it looks like. But Amara cut him off by placing her hand on the binder and sliding it toward herself, not taking it, just claiming visibility over it. I want every document linked to my signature history. Every amendment, every override trigger. Lillian studied her for a moment longer than necessary, then turned slightly toward her console, typing something that Amara could not see. A soft alert tone chimed somewhere in the system, and on one of the screens behind them a new status appeared. Subject awareness confirmed. Amara noticed it immediately, her gaze narrowing. What does that mean? She asked, but Lillian did not answer right away, because at that exact moment Darius's phone vibrated once, then twice, and when he looked down at it, his expression changed in a way he could not fully hide, as if something he had been waiting for had just moved from planning into execution. Darius stared at his phone for only a second, but that second was enough for the entire system around them to shift tone. Like a machine recognizing that instructions had just changed hands. Amara noticed it immediately, not because anyone spoke, but because every screen in the operations room flickered once and then reloaded into a different interface layer. One she had not seen before, labeled Public Flow Adjustment Protocol. Lillian's fingers froze above her console, and then the room's intercom crackled to life. Not with a human voice at first, but with a pre-recorded neutral tone announcing, "Attention! Ceremony integrity review in progress." Darius finally looked up, and his expression was no longer pleading or careful. It was controlled in the way people become when they are no longer trying to convince but to execute. Amara, this is bigger than you think, he said quietly, but before she could respond, her phone began vibrating non-stop, notifications stacking faster than she could read them. Wedding group chat. Messages exploding with screenshots she had never seen before. Emails, flagged documents, and edited images showing her signature next to altered consent forms. Nina's name appeared in almost every caption like a signature of its own, followed by phrases like, concerned for Amara's stability, and possible disruption risk. Amara turned toward Lillian's screen and saw something worse. Her profile had been tagged internally as unstable subject, access restriction recommended. She did not speak immediately because she understood what was happening now. This was not confusion anymore. This was containment dressed as procedure, and Nina's voice suddenly echoed from the hallway outside the glass doors. Not recorded this time but live, soft, shaking, perfectly calibrated for witnesses. I didn't want it to come to this, she said as she stepped into view with two members of hotel security behind her, holding a folded statement paper like she had been forced into responsibility. She looked at Amara with eyes that carried practiced fear, the kind that convinces people before truth even enters the room. I've been worried about her for weeks, Nina continued. She's been under extreme stress, and the planners agreed she might misinterpret arrangements. Amara felt something cold settle in her chest, because the wording was too clean, too coordinated. No one improvises language like that under pressure. Darius did not interrupt, and that silence was louder than any accusation. Lillian finally spoke, but not to defend Amara, only to clarify procedure, saying Amara's access level had been temporarily suspended pending review. Amara watched as her own permissions disappeared from the wall screens one by one, replaced by neutral system placeholders. But instead of reacting emotionally, she did something different. She stepped closer to the main console, her eyes scanning the logs she had seen earlier, and noticed a pattern in timestamps. Every escalation aligned with Darius's phone activity. Every accusation mirrored a system update triggered externally. She reached into her tote bag and pulled out the engagement folder she had taken earlier, opening it on the table, flipping past pages until she found what she needed. The original authorization signature metadata page. She compared it silently with the altered version on screen, and then she said, not loudly but clearly enough that everyone in the room heard, "These signatures were modified after submission." Nina's expression tightened for the first time, just slightly, like a mask adjusting under pressure, and Darius stepped forward half a pace as if to intercept the direction of the room. But it was too late, because Amara had already noticed something else in the system logs. A second admin access line that did not belong to either of them, tagged under Event Governance Override, and when she traced it, the name attached to it made her realize this was not just a betrayal unfolding around her. It was a coordinated rewrite of her entire legal identity inside the wedding itself, and as she looked up, security moved one step closer, not toward Nina, not toward Darius, but toward her. The moment security stepped toward Amara, the room did not erupt. It narrowed, as if every sound had been filtered through a tightening lens that left only procedure and consequence behind. Lillian Cross took one step back from the console, not to abandon control but to signal compliance with a system she no longer fully commanded. Nina remained near the doorway with her hands folded in front of her, performing calm like it was a learned language, and Darius stood between screens and people as if trying to decide which version of reality he still had authority over. Amara did not move away from the approaching guards, but she also did not retreat. Her hand tightened around the engagement folder, its edges now slightly bent from everything it had endured in her hands alone. One of the security officers spoke quietly, "Ma'am, we need you to come with us for clarification review," and the word review landed with a clinical weight that did not match the intimacy of betrayal unfolding in front of her. Amara looked at him, then passed him to the wall of screens where her identity had been reduced to a system label, unstable subject. And for the first time she understood that this was no longer about a wedding. It was about classification, containment, and narrative control. Nina finally stepped forward, her voice soft enough to sound concerned but precise enough to be effective. "I think she just needs rest. She's been overwhelmed all day." Amara almost smiled at the irony because Nina's performance of care now matched the structure of every document she had seen. Carefully placed empathy designed to justify removal. Darius shifted slightly as if to speak, but no words came out, and that silence became another piece of evidence Amara quietly stored in her mind. Then Lillian spoke again, this time lower, to the guards. "We follow protocol until legal confirmed status," and that sentence pushed something inside Amara into clarity. Legal status, not emotional truth, not memory, not relationship, only documentation. Amara slowly opened her engagement folder again, ignoring the officers now standing closer than before, and flipped to the metadata page she had first dismissed as technical noise. There. It was again the signature chain, but this time she noticed what she had missed earlier. The timestamps were not just altered, they were synchronized with external admin access logs that did not belong to any wedding staff profile she recognized. Her eyes traced the pattern backward, and the moment she did, the earlier clue from the operations room resurfaced in a different form. Subject awareness confirmed was not a warning. It was a trigger event label, meaning the system had been waiting for her to recognize the structure itself. And once she did, escalation protocols were activated. Amara exhaled slowly, steadying herself as she looked at Darius for the first time, not as a fiancé but as a participant in a controlled process she had been placed inside without full disclosure. "You signed this knowing what it would do?" she said quietly, and Darius finally broke his silence, not with denial but with exhaustion. "I signed what I was told was protection for everyone involved." Nina let out a small breath that sounded like relief disguised as concern. "See?" she whispered, "even he thought it was for the best." But Amara no longer accepted that framing, because she had found something else. Inside the folder, a previously overlooked amendment page labeled Forensic Override Consent, and beside it, the same unknown executive witness signature she had seen in passing before but not understood, now fully visible, not anonymous, not accidental, and as the security officers gently but firmly asked her to step away from the console, Amara closed the folder, not in surrender, but in preservation. And in that moment she made a decision that removed every possibility of turning back. She was no longer going to defend herself inside their system. She was going to reconstruct the system itself from the outside, starting with whoever signed that final hidden authorization. The moment Amara decided she would no longer defend herself inside their system, something shifted in the room that no security protocol could fully contain, because decisions made without permission always change the energy before they change the outcome. Darius stood frozen between the monitors and the guards, his phone still vibrating intermittently in his pocket like a heartbeat he no longer controlled. Nina remained near the doorway, her expression carefully composed but now visibly thinner around the edges, as if the narrative she had been holding together was starting to strain, and Lillian Cross finally stepped away from the console entirely, not surrendering authority but redirecting it. She turned the main screen toward Amara and said quietly, "If you're going to challenge this, you need to understand what actually triggered it." Amara opened the engagement folder again, placing it flat on the glass table, her fingers tracing the metadata page she had memorized under pressure. And then she pointed to the forensic override signature line. "This one," she said. "This is not my family, not Darius, not Nina, so who is it?" Lillian hesitated, then typed a command into the system that pulled up a hidden authorization chain, and for the first time the room displayed something that had not been visible before, a layered access structure with 3 independent approvals, one from Groomside Governance, one from Event Administration, and one labeled Executive Oversight Trust. Amara leaned closer, her voice steady now in a way that came from exhaustion turning into clarity. "That last one didn't exist in any of the documents I signed." Lillian nodded. "Exactly," she replied, "because it's not part of standard consent, it's part of escalation design." Nina immediately interrupted, shaking her head slightly. "This is being misread," she said softly. "It was only supposed to ensure smooth execution in case of emotional instability." But Amara turned toward her slowly, and for the first time, Nina's composure cracked just enough to reveal uncertainty beneath it. "Emotional instability based on who decided that?" Amara asked, and before Nina could answer, Darius finally stepped forward, not to defend himself, but to look directly at the screen. Requesting the full audit trail, Lillian complied, and the system expanded into a timeline that showed every modification, every signature adjustment, every hidden approval feeding into the substitution contingency protocol. Amara watched as her own digital identity was gradually rewritten across the logs, not erased, but reframed, and then she noticed something critical. A gap between the initial authorization and the final override, a 36-minute window where external access had been inserted manually. She pointed it out immediately. "Here, this gap, someone entered the system after both of you signed." The security officers behind them shifted, now less certain about procedural authority, and Lillian zoomed in, confirming the intrusion signature belonged to an unregistered executive key, which immediately triggered a secondary system alert labeled real-time validation required. At that moment, the room's doors opened again, and this time, it was not a controlled entry, it was a summoned one. A senior compliance officer from the hotel's legal governance board stepped in holding a sealed tablet, and said without greeting, "We have received a dispute escalation from corporate oversight," and Amara realized immediately that this was no longer just about her wedding or her relationship. It was now a corporate-level governance conflict tied to contractual manipulation. Nina tried one last time to speak, her voice sharper now. "This is being exaggerated," she said. "Amara is misunderstanding technical safeguards." But the officer raised the tablet, showing a live verification feed, and asked one question that silenced the entire room. "Then explain why her signature metadata was altered after system lock," because in that instant, the system itself confirmed what Amara had been reconstructing piece by piece, and as the room fell into absolute silence, the truth was no longer something anyone could frame differently. It was already publicly validated inside the system that had been used to contain her. The silence in the corporate governance room did not break immediately after the verification feed confirmed the altered metadata. It fractured slowly, like glass under pressure that no one dares to touch directly. Amara stood still at the center of it, not as a suspect anymore, but as a variable the system had failed to contain. Nina took a half-step backward, her earlier composure collapsing into something thinner, less rehearsed, as if the script she had been following no longer matched the live broadcast of consequences. Darius remained motionless, staring at the verification screen where Amara's signature history was now displayed in full forensic sequence, not as accusation but as proof of manipulation, and for the first time he looked less like a groom and more like someone realizing he had been reading only half a contract. The senior compliance officer lowered the tablet slightly and said, In a calm voice that carried more weight than any raised tone, the system confirms unauthorized post-lock modification of consent artifacts, and that sentence did what shouting never could. It removed interpretation. Amara finally exhaled, not in relief, but in recognition that truth had shifted from something she had to prove into something already recorded. Nina suddenly spoke again, faster now, trying to rebuild meaning through language. "This is being misrepresented," she said. "I was protecting her from stress escalation," but Lillian Cross interrupted her for the first time without hesitation. "Protection protocols do not alter legal signatures," she said, and that correction landed like a final nail. Sealing an argument that could no longer move, Amara turned slightly toward Nina, not with anger, but with precision. The same calm she had learned under pressure. "You didn't protect me," she said softly. "You replaced me." The word hung in the room long enough that even the security officers stopped shifting. Darius finally spoke, his voice lower now, stripped of performance. "I signed documents I believed were safeguards," he said, but Amara didn't look at him immediately. Instead, she reached into her tote bag and pulled out the engagement folder one last time, placing it on the table not as evidence, but as closure. Then she opened it to the first page, the one with her original signature, slightly smudged from handling, and for a brief moment the room was no longer a corporate environment, but a memory of a morning before everything was rewritten. Nina tried one last time to speak, but no words came out cleanly, because every explanation now had to pass through the same system that had already rejected her version of events. The compliance officer made a final note on the tablet and said quietly, "Corrective governance action will proceed," and Amara understood that meant consequences were no longer theoretical, they were procedural. She looked at Nina, then at Darius, and for the first time did not ask for explanation or apology, only acknowledgement. "I am not part of this version of the story anymore," she said, and no one corrected her. Security did not move toward her now, they stepped aside because the classification had already changed. Nina's face tightened as she realized there would be formal review hearings, documentation audits, and reputational impact beyond this room. Darius lowered his gaze, not because he was forgiven, but because he had finally seen the full structure he had participated in. Amara picked up the engagement folder and closed it gently, the sound of paper aligning soft but final, and as she turned toward the exit, she paused only once, glancing back at the ring still visible in earlier footage replaying on the screen behind them, no longer on Nina's finger in that frozen image, but now just a recorded artifact of a decision that had already been undone. And then she walked out, carrying nothing but her name as it originally belonged to her.